Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the deepest dive on Armored Core 6. This is a deepest dive from MinnMax, a channel about games, friends, and getting better. In this deepest dive, we will be talking about chapters 2 through 4 of Armored Core 6. This is slightly different than what we said at the end of last episode, because we realized that we really wanted to be able to cover New Game Plus. So this will be chapter 2 through 4, and next week will be 5 and all the New Game Pluses and everything else. But for right now, we won't be spoiling anything beyond chapter 4. My name is Jacob Geller. I am the host for this, and I am joined once again by Suriel Vasquez.
Hello.
And I am also joined by Renata Price. Hello, Renata.
Hello and hi and howdy and hello.
We have two people with mech doctorates here that I am so excited to once again get into the deepest discussion we possibly can on everything that happened in these chapters, which is a lot. But first, let me say that MinnMax is completely possible only because of Patreon. If you would like to submit a comment on chapter 5 or beyond, as you will be hearing so many comments on chapters 2 through 4 in this, you can join MinnMax at any tier and submit comments to that to possibly be read on air. And if you join at the $5 tier, you can have this video as an audio podcast. You can carry it with you wherever you go. This will probably be a long conversation, and so I think it will be good to have it as a podcast. Anyway, Armored Core 6, chapters 2 through 4. We like to start by playing a little game called Most Common Comment. I want you to reach into your memory, look through your notes, and think, what in this section do you think the most people talked about in our community? Suriel, do you have a guess?
People talking about their builds.
Ren, do you have a guess?
Ornstein and Smo Redux.
In fact, the most common builds, maybe, but a little broad, and I do have to give it to the very specific Ice Worm.
Wow.
You would not believe how many people wrote in with the phrase Ice Worm in their comment. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. Let's get broad impressions. How are you feeling about it, and how much have you played? Ren, you played like 15 plus hours of chapter 1. So now that you have most of the game's levels available to you, how deep are you in this?
I currently have bought out the entire shop and have 4 million above what I needed to buy out the entire shop, because I wanted to, before we came on this, last night I was like, I've never really done an energy weapons build. Let me put something together for chapter 5. And I started thinking about what a fun build to go into chapter 5 with would be, and ended up settling on something. But I have put in an obscene amount of time into this video game. A significant amount of which dedicated to fighting the chapter 4 boss and then refighting the chapter 4 boss, because I think it may be one of my favorite fights in video game history, right next to Jetstream Sam in terms of quality.
Oh, let's go. Suriel, how's that shop looking for you? You still got some money signs on things?
Definitely have not bought out the entire shop. But at this point, I'm at 22 hours, although some of it was because I had to go in the middle of said chapter 4 boss fight. I had an out, and I didn't want to restart that mission, so I just left the game on for 2 hours and came back. But I've beaten all of chapter 4, beaten all of the arena so far, which actually got easier as I went. And then I think I tried dabbling in multiplayer, but I couldn't get a match. So that has been my thing. I feel like I have most of the parts that I want, because I'm going we'll get into it, but I've been going with a very kind of specific build, and it feels like I'm just kind of refining that. But I have had to go out and I died at this boss, and what I have is not going to cut it. I need to start the mission over so I can buy more stuff. So I definitely the advantage of having everything available to you in the assembly screen after you die in a mission is very tempting. And I think I would want to have that available, but I have not put as much time as Ren has.
And presumably, once you've put in enough time to buy everything and have everything available, then I'm assuming, Ren, you could just beat any boss like with your fists at this point, right?
Yeah, I mean, like that's kind of the thing is that like I'm fighting these bosses more as like exercises in viability and like determining how viable and like how well suited a given AC is to like different combat situations. Like I'm basically running The Sims to determine like what theaters I should deploy each AC for eventually, trying to S rank the full game, which I would say every mission is an A or S rank, but there are currently some missions I have that I need to I'm currently unranked on, and I would like to S rank this entire video game very badly, including a new game plus. And so, currently all the builds are mostly just like, I go to fight Balteus as my okay, is this build viable enough to kill Balteus effectively? And efficiently. If yes, then I can go do a lot of chapter 3 and 4 stuff with it, and then if I can take out the chapter 4 boss, that is a long-term viable build. Dog with wings, long-term viable build.
So let's read the first comment from the community, where Can't Blink says, I'm thoroughly enjoying replaying levels with wildly different builds. Other than Sekiro, we can't replay from bosses without a full run, and Sekiro forces largely the same build/fight each time. AC6 lets me come at it with something wildly different just to see how it would fare or to test whatever idiotic build concept I've got against whichever boss. Want to fight Balteus with a pile bunker? Have at it. Want to put only verticals down the furnace shaft? Give it a shot. Want to fight a worm without a key component? Good luck with that. I think what this game has, and I think Can't Blink basically nails it, is the build variety of a Souls game or an Elden Ring or whatever, without the time investment that you have to put in to both make that build and get back to that boss. I would play Bloodborne and think, wow, I wonder how that boss would go with an arcane build, but it's well, I guess I'll just have to wonder unless I want to put 30 more hours in. And the fact that you can just do it right away from a menu here is just enrapturing.
Yeah, I think it also helps that I think the game definitely encourages you to do that in a way that other games don't, where I think because you are more invested in individual builds, the game has to be a little bit flatter because it has to accommodate okay, this boss is really easy with an arcane build, but other builds also have to be able to beat it, right? And that's also true in this game, but I think there are, in this case, a couple of bosses that are very much you need to change things up, that are not explicitly, but very explicitly saying, or not explicit, but implicitly saying, hey, you're getting a lot of ricochet damage on this boss, you should consider other kind of weaponry, right? In a way that a Souls game cannot really do. And I think that is encouraging you to say, go back to the assembly screen, and it is not a failure of your build for it to not completely gel against this boss.
Well, I mean, I will say that the Souls games do have this, right? There are bosses that hard stop, or don't hard stop, but are specifically tailored to certain. That's what makes the Souls games, that's what makes the modular difficulty at the series core the thing that it is, right? If you struggle with a thing in the Souls games, you can probably stat your way out of that problem and into another one. But the thing is that like you're saying, you never know what the other problems that other people are statting themselves into are. And I think that one of the cool strengths here is that you do in fact get to see how to stat yourself into new and interesting problems that may work better with your particular skill set. Yeah,
and just the fact that statting takes no time. It's so exciting that none of these guns have upgrade trees. That when I pick, a laser rifle that I've never used before, I don't think, well, this will be pretty weak until I pump some resources into it. That you are just, it feels almost like radically simple to say, because it's that's how guns work. But especially in these types of games, I've been so trained to be well, I won't actually know how good a Zweihander is until I put, a bunch of large Titanite shards into it. And for this to just be like, nope, it works. Like that shotgun's gonna hit as hard for you as anyone else, as long as you're using it correctly, is very exciting to me.
Yeah, I think the only like real upgrade system is the OS tuning, where you could like that is basically your stat points, but that's entirely separate from your weapons, right? And so like you can there are ways that you can respec, but it is less about like going for a specific build and more like enhancing your own body almost to augment it. It doesn't feel like you have to respec for different builds.
Well, the other thing that I'll say is that this is a slight difference between AC4 and 4A, in which like they had a similar OS tuning system, but their tuning system was, everything had 7. It was basically that you had this thing called FRS memory, which was a memory system that you could basically plug extra points into to like get just a little bit more power out of a certain part. But that was similarly extremely quick to interact with. You could remove 25 points from one thing and just put them into another thing in like less than a minute. Like not even less than a minute, like seconds you could do that. And actually I will say I do miss that level of OS tuning in terms of like trying to figure out the exact most optimized version of a given build. Like I remember when I was working on one of my AC builds and like looking down and realizing that I had pulled the exact maximum amount of firepower out of the combination of generator and legs that I had. There was no other weapon that I could equip. I had made the most optimal body for the guns I was trying to hold, and that felt extremely cool. I feel like you never get that in Souls ever.
Yeah. I feel like we jumped into talking about builds without it's so easy to do. But a quick temperature read on this game from last week to this week. Surreal, up, down, same. Where are you?
I had like 2 major walls that made me kind of nervous about finishing before time. But it's like seeing a mission list is not necessarily indicative of how much progress you've made, because like I had a big blocker against the sea spider early on, and then against the chapter 4 boss, and those made me like I don't know if every boss is this hard, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it. But yeah, there are missions that like it took like 10 minutes or whatever, and so like there were some periods where I was a little stressed about that. But overall, it feels like this game is doing exactly what I wanted to do. It's just like every mission is kind of testing a different, like, is basically doing something specific and having you fight. You get a big mix of like, here's a big thing that you're fighting, or like a machine or something. But then there's also just like, just mech on mech fights where it's just like, here is a mission that is basically just a boss, and like you're gonna have to fight another armored core, and it's like a good like one-on-one fight where you feel evenly matched, and it's not like this big hulking thing. And then you also get missions where you're doing things like a quasi stealth mission, or a mission where it doesn't feel like it is just like wade into another combat encounter. And so I think I'm overall like higher on the game overall, and just feeling like, okay, I have not spent as much time as Ren, but I already want to do other builds. I want to test what this boss is like with a more nimble build, or more like a different kind of weapon set. But I did feel a little bit railroaded into like just optimizing my current build because of a little bit of that time pressure, because I've had a busy week.
Ren, how about you? All up, baby, just continuing to be red hot.
I burning hot. Like truly, I am having a ball. I'm having a ball with this game. I'm having a very good time. I don't know. I think this may be like my favorite action game. It is like very quickly approaching that bar of like hitting the Metal Gear Rising Revengeance tier of like, okay, cool. I can think about how this game feels in like my bones. I can visualize the like configurations that my hands will be in as I am piloting these different mechs, and it's sick. It's so good. I'm absolutely in love with it.
Drake H from Patreon said, "This is my first AC game, but it has consumed my life since released. Just got the Platinum Trophy last night after 27 hours of playtime, and S-ranking each mission was a blast." Damn, kind of a ninja. It's like I haven't been allowed to finish this game, but even if I was, I do not think I would have S-ranked everything after a mere 27 hours. As far as the chunk of a game, I think that the Ice Worm is the best gimmick boss that From has ever done. We will get to it. But let's talk about Chapter 2. Because we left off at the end of Chapter 1. We fought Balteus. We thought, there surely will be a lot more that happens in this story. And we were bathed in coral, which put a little voice in our head. And we had lots of questions. And maybe the most immediate question that Chapter 2 poses is, how long is a chapter supposed to be in this game? Because Chapter 2 is 3 missions, which I thought was very strange.
I guess the chapters mostly refer to like what area you're fighting in. Like if you think about like there are some like you do go back every once in a while, but for the most part like the various arenas of this game feel like pretty segmented, like pretty like separated by chapter. You know, the chapter 4 is the descent into the like coral facility, and that's what 4 missions.
It's 3, and then you intercept the red guns, or like you fight you make that one mission with your choice.
3,
and that one also takes place there, yeah.
Yes, 3 choice there, and then you do reach the coral convergence, and then the stealth mission, which technically starts chapter 5. But I played it anyway. I'm not.
No, we played it. Yeah,
I was gonna stop playing Armored Core. Are you kidding me? But yeah, I don't know. I Armored Core has always had like pretty variable chapter lengths. I will say that like AC4 and 4 Answer, or at least AC4 Answer, had like pretty variable chapters.
Another thing that is fascinating about chapter 2 is that it starts you in this mission in maybe one of the game's like biggest single levels, where you are just in this enormous facility, and like fully half the collectibles in the game, it feels like, are in this one level. Like I have not been attempting to S rank everything, but I have got all the chests and logs and whatever up until this point, and like this level has like 3 chests and like 7 logs, and there is no other mission that even comes close to that, other than maybe the end of chapter 4. But it's really cool. This level is just, it's like, hey, you wanted big stuff? Here is a big stuff level.
Well, it's also great pacing to me, because this is right after you get out of Balteus, and then it's like that fight it was like such a stopping block for so many people, and then you just open up into this like vast expanse where you are back to absolutely devastating everything around you, until you get to the cleaner, depending on who you are. Yeah.
Suriel, you versus the good old cleaner. How'd that boss go down?
This one actually went down fairly quick. I think by this point, I had dual grenade launchers and dual miniguns, which is basically the build that I've been using for most of the game. And I think, the concussive, the combination of explosive and like just really in your face kinetic damage, I think really did a number on this boss. But there's definitely like a charging bull mechanic where you can do all the damage you want, but if you don't avoid those giant swinging arms, you're just going to get wrecked. So it felt a little bit more like a Dark Souls boss, where it's like, because I think in a lot of cases against some of the more like standard ACs, it's more about like, can you run your game plan and how does the enemy react to it? Whereas this, and I think the chapter 4 boss and the Ice Worm kind of are you need to do what the boss is telling you to do. And this is definitely the one that is doing that most early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the cleaner is it is just a very traditional boss fight, and not, it's one of those things where it's like, you couldn't just make a cleaner build in the way that you could make a build that looks a lot like the other people you're fighting. So it did feel like, just kind of learn this, do it. If you go in with a tetrapod, if you can kind of hover, this boss can't even touch you. It can't do anything.
Basically, everyone but bipeds has a great time against this boss, because that's also true of, or standard bipeds. Reverse jointed bipeds also jump right over, just like jump so high that it's just like you're leapfrogging and just like dunking baskets directly into his big hole. But yeah, it's I think it's a fun boss.
I agree, and it's nice. It is nice to have a boss that is kind of a maybe 2 or 3 tries after Balteus, which might have been a dozen or more tries.
Yeah, it's also like visually, it is like strange because like you're used to seeing all this very sleek, very cool looking technology, and here's just this clunky ass, like I have 2 giant like meshers or whatever, like drills or something, and I'm just like a big clunky robot that's gonna swing its giant arms at you. It feels so outside of the aesthetic of this game.
Carla's trying to kill you with a garbage truck is what this boss is. It's also the first time we meet Carla. We can talk about Carla. The different characters in this game, because there is a lot more like character work and stuff going on here. But what's Carla's deal other than being a cool lady?
Is this a question for the class?
Yeah.
So basically, isn't Carla's whole deal that she runs RAD, which is a group of people who basically just a bunch of weird junk scientists who also all happen to be addicted to the like imbibing coral. And basically it is this like culture of like weird scientists, kind of this like organization like led by Carla, and the other dosers, which is I think a weird name, basically like fight and like scrabble. It's very classic, like post-apocalyptic gang scrabbling for territory.
Yeah, I wrote down this section of the game is really like, what is coral? Because like, okay, we know that Walter wants to get his hands on it. We know that Rubicon is essentially like valuable because it's got coral. You kind of assume it's like oil, and then it's like, okay, but also these people are taking it like a drug.
Also, it has personhood. Also, coral itself has person is a kind of because again, the central question of mech fiction, a lot of mech fiction remains: what if there was a radically new way of being a person? The answer is always we would make it into a new kind of gun. Including for cool, like that is as true of your character, as it is the coral itself. Like I think that's one of my favorite things about the Chapter 4 boss, is that you and the Chapter 4 boss are effectively in the same position. You are both bound to these bodies. These are bodies these are like, you are both beings that have been turned into the targeting system of a gun. That is what you are. It's just that gun happens to be trying to protect the coral and you are trying to get to it. And that like same instrument, like that like mirrored nature of that fight is what makes it like probably my favorite fight in the game. Just like thematically, because it is just like relentless in that way.
Yeah, I agree. I also think I think we should talk about the arena in a separate way. But I do think really interesting with Carla is when you fight her in the arena, and one, it's like weird, like all minds like, wait, what's happening here? But also like Carla's build has stuff that I do not have still. Like her mech has like missile launchers that I have never seen, and it is this really like the stuff that she's working with is somehow very separate from like what I have access to right now.
Yeah. I mean, like this is also the very fun thing is that like she obviously was not really trying that hard. This game is so obviously someone on the writing staff headcanoned Cinder Carla as their like OC and was just like, listen, we can't have her on screen saving the player a dozen times, but know that in my heart she does. Yeah. I just think about that scene where like she shows up and they're like, she just like kills a bunch of grunts and then she's basically like, yeah, that was nothing. Like someone's like, why do you even come here? She was like, I thought it'd be fun. And it's just like a very charming character moment for her. But she is, so much better and so different from everyone you interact with.
And like they do a great job of like distinguishing her as a pilot, right? Like you mentioned that moment in the arena where it kind of feels like she's almost staring into the screen of like, she interrupts the flow of that, like the arena procession.
Yeah. She's like, I know you're in there. Hello.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, it's kind of weird that you're just running simulations of me. But And so she's a very much a character that they want you to pay attention to. She is probably like her logo with like the purple spider is like the most distinctive one that you encounter. And it's so strange how, well, it's like a testament to like the writing that she doesn't even have a face. She doesn't express, but it's like just through audio, she becomes, I guess, most people's favorite character, right? Because she's the one who has the most distinctive personality so far.
Yeah, well, second favorite after the one who calls me buddy. But yeah,
are you rusty pilled? Are you? Of course you are. Of course you are. You are ruined by that man.
I truly am, and we'll talk about how ruined I was by that man later on. I've been on the AC subreddit, and I have seen some fan art of Carla, even though you do not see her face. People have ideas about what she looks like. So Coral's weird. You beat the cleaner. Carla decides that she wants to work with you. You do like a very quick mission for her. But then you do a mission that probably had the most friction for me of the game, because it includes the Chapter 2 boss. But before you get there, there is this part with orbital lasers that on subsequent playthroughs, I have just been like, okay, I guess I'll just fly under the whole bridge and like balance on these little beams. But dodging lasers in this game is uniquely difficult. I don't feel like I have the timing or they're tracking down at all, because they beep, and it seems like the beep is a warning, so then you can dodge. But man, it is really hard to get out of their way.
It depends on what kind of dodge you have. Like, if there are some quick boosts that I do not think could actually get you out of the way of one of those lasers, right? There are some builds that literally cannot do it. But like, I think that I have had like a much wider window because I use pretty much exclusively reverse jointed legs. And so I like kick off the ground so hard that it throws me forward so fast that I like have like an extended window to like dodge those. But even then, it's like really hard to get those specific orbital lasers.
Yeah, and I'm on the exact opposite boat where I'm basically using tetrapods all the time. So it's like very beefy, very like very short dodges, like not a lot of upward thrust. And so like I basically had to figure out what the underground path is, where there's like a bunch of effectively ventilation shafts that you're going through underneath the top area. You just can't. I basically just avoided the lasers by being under them the whole time, which is nice because then I could just like use the tetrapod hover to just like sail across the bottom of the bridge and avoid the lasers entirely. But yeah, like those first before I found that, it was just like I'm trying to dodge and it's not working. And I feel like by the time that I got to the Chapter 4 boss, I had to realize that like the beeps that happen when the game notifies you, that's not your cue. That's like a cue that you need to dodge soon, but it's not like dodge right now all the time, especially for my build, because some attacks don't happen as quickly as the noise implies it that it will.
Yeah. So I thought for that mission, I had never seen those little drones that turn into missiles. I, for some reason, assumed they were like targeting for the lasers. So I was trying to like build a long range build that could like snipe those, because then I thought I wouldn't get targeted. But like, no, they're separate and they just kind of screw with you. So getting there was kind of a trial. And then there was another trial, because I think for me, this was the hardest I was stuck on a boss in this game, like significantly more so than
the sea spider?
Than Chapter 4 was the sea spider.
Really?
And we have we have feedback about that. Sean Mills says, I love the start and end of the sea spider boss fight. The spider flying in and landing on you to take out a chunk of your health really sets the stakes for how intense this fight will be. And Ryan said the sea spider boss wrecked me. After about 15 retries, I finally squeezed out a win, but only after switching to tank mode. It was a major turning point for me because it made me realize that full tank build just doesn't lose. I have beat every arena mission to this point with zero issues as tank. I'm debating switching back because I feel it trivializes a lot of the game. What was y'all's first build to beat Sea Spider with?
So the one that I had, so I was running like dual railguns and like a bunch of missiles and stuff. And so like that had been doing pretty, like basically since Balteas had been doing pretty short work of everything. And this boss does like shrugs off energy stuff really well. And so, but I was like still so insistent that this was the build that I didn't switch until I realized like, yeah, this is like, I'm just like doing way less damage than I should be to this boss because it's just resistant. And so that's ultimately what ended up having me switch over to, because I was using a little bit of the pile bunker still. But this is when I went like full like miniguns and missile launchers, like all kinetic and explosive damage. And that definitely helped a lot. But I had a lot of issue because I don't have a lot of upward thrust with a boss that is constantly hovering above you. And so, and like the miniguns are very short range. They're like short to medium range. And so I just had issues like once it started, you know, turning into the propeller, basically, I just had a tough time getting to it. And there was like the one shot where I was like, okay, I know the exact pattern of like, it's going to move around. It's going to do this little low level sweep and then fly up. And I just happened to be right above it as it was rising and just laid into it the first time. But this was definitely after like a lot of trying to figure out how exactly to beat that second form.
Yeah, Malcolm H said the Sea Spider lifting off and becoming a flying boss was such a twist I wasn't expecting. My whole build was originally raining down fire from above, so that shakeup really had me on my toes and improvising. Ren, what was your Sea Spider killer?
Honestly, I don't remember. If I'm remembering correctly, I believe Sea Spider was a one and done.
Oh, really?
I do not particularly remember it, but I believe that was the last fight I did with my Mech White Raven V2, which was it was a variant on the build I took down Balteas with, which was 2 Ludlows, the Songbird grenade cannon, and then a pile bunker. The Ludlows apply constant damage and take out grunts. The Songbirds take out everything still standing after that. And then the pile bunker is basically like my big damage button. And that worked totally fine. I was able to very easily fly over the like Sea Spider's like second form, and I just killed it very quickly. And so I didn't even see the Beyblade attack that like apparently has been a real trouble for folks.
Yeah, it has the second form basically, where like once you get bosses down, like the biggest bosses definitely have like a second and then later third forms, where they change tactics on you, and so you have to adapt to that stuff. But like my biggest impediment was that this was definitely one of those roll, like in Dark Souls, it was like a roll forward boss, basically, where it's just like the strategy is not to like avoid its attacks, but to just be on it constantly, because a lot of the attacks actually will miss you if you're super close to the boss. So it has this giant leap where it like just jumps at you that I just couldn't dodge the normal way. And I basically had to basically be where it starts. And so I basically flew into the attack and was able to dodge it more consistently that way.
Yeah. It also doesn't help that you can't do damage to it from the bottom during that second phase.
Yeah, you have to figure out a way up. And so like for a tetrapod build with not a lot of upward thrust, I definitely got lucky when I actually did beat it.
This one was a kind of constant reconfiguring my build after every time. And essentially what I landed on was a build that could dagger it almost immediately, but then while it was staggered, everything was like reloading, and so I wasn't able to actually do much damage to it. But I just found like I've since replayed it and had an easier time, but it's like I found its attacks just really hard to even track like how to avoid them. And so it's just like, I just need to out DPS this thing. And so I had a tank tread. I had 2 of the like direct hit rocket launchers, like the ones that do a lot of damage if you hit them, and the Songbird, and then being able to switch out one of my rocket launchers for the piston. And I would basically just lay into all of those immediately, which would stagger it instantly. And then I would just wait for everything to reload and hope that I could get in like a little more damage before it did. But like this one was tough. But since I've been back, and I was like, oh, I think I was just really scared of it. Cherry Stemic says, when I saw the sea spider use coral for fuel, I had a feeling we would later be able to use it too. I thought about the implications of that and what Air would think of me using it. Love how the customization of your AC feels relevant to the narrative in a role-playing sense. And Sean Mills said, after the fight, Air sadly remarks that they were using coral for fuel, a really devastating thought given how rare and important coral seems to be to the Rubiconians. And in fact, it is the Rubiconians, right? Like it's them, it's their souls, right?
Yeah,
Ren?
it definitely takes the like Soylent Green, almost like Final Fantasy VII. Like it's the life stream. It is literally the health of the people around. It's basically the health of the planet, right? And so like by extracting and using it for fuel, you are literally sucking the planet dry.
All of this is true. It's correct. I agree.
I also go ahead.
I would like to note that if you just take a quick look at this image for my chapter 4 build, dog with wings, you'll notice in the bottom left of this image, what's that? Yes, the IACO1G aorta generator.
Yep.
You are participating in the coral economy.
I would say that my headcanon, which is not accurate, but in my heart of hearts, what is happening here is that like the coral augmentation that like your character undergoes, because you're augmented by coral to be able to pilot at all. That is what augmentation is to become integrated with coral. In my head, this machine runs on the pilot's blood. Like that dog with wings is like the worst, most like aggressive vision of a mech that like literally burns through the pilot's life force. So that's my idea with dog with wings. That's why I run an aorta.
These are the mental gymnastics that I've generated to say that my build is morally correct.
Mine's morally correct because it hurts me.
There is some interesting writing in the arena descriptions of like what pilots think about the different gens and how it's like Hawkins says that he doesn't want the coral augmentation because it's involved in like a loss of humanity and whatever. Like there's a lot of little tidbits about that. I'll say for the sea spider, I just heard Carla say that machine was built by a team of mad scientists like 4,000 times. Yeah. It was. We talked about last Deepest Dive, kind of replaying and hearing different snippets of dialogue, which is true. But also, if you're replaying a boss, you're going to hear a lot of the same dialogue over and over, which I learned.
To the point where on the chapter 4 boss specifically, I used them as cues. Because by the spoilers for chapter 4, but it has a second form that you cannot damage until like you see the life bar. And I know that the life bar is about to happen when like a particular line of dialogue ends. So it's like, it's extracting its energy from the planet. And this is when I had like I had the two the stun needle lasers, and that's that's my when she finishes saying that line, and that's my cue to fire and stagger it immediately. And so like those as much as I wanted to turn that stuff off, because it's like I get it, I know that I know how this thing is powered. You've told me 1,000 times. They became useful as like a practice tool.
There's an interesting thing where Carla says that she feels sorry for us that Walker is our handler, which I just thought was a little interesting line. And then we put ourselves in a cannon and shoot ourselves across an ocean,
which is a cool thing to do.
A very normal, fine way to travel.
It's the year of launching yourself off of things with this and Tears of the Kingdom. You're constantly catapulting yourself everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is almost exactly like Doom Eternal when he puts himself in the gun and shoots himself into the surface of Mars. Brian W. says, I love how hurling things through the air is a main form of transportation in this game, from the jump lifts to giant rocket-powered slingshots across an ocean. I was hoping to see the receiving end of that cargo launch, but sadly it seemed like we just crashed somewhere. I agree. I wanted to see it just like...
Which is a pretty common mech thing of like basically the way that, you know, in like in your average episode of Gundam, people like all the Gundams are held in these giant battleships, and there's like a what is effectively a Gundam catapult that launches them, that they like put their feet, like they step into these little like repositories for their feet, and they're basically launched into the sky to join the fight effectively. So it's like a pretty common, but one of this size that is like, oh yeah, we need to cross an ocean. This is the best way to do it, is to basically fire you out of a railgun, is like an enlargement of the like the common Gundam catapult thing.
Yeah, just you are a gun, step into a bigger gun, get shot, gun.
Exactly.
The sixth guy says, can I just say that after reaching Chapter 3, it almost felt like a different game. Suddenly, I was playing AC 6.5. Sure, Chapter 2 showed that missions can be larger now and have some hidden items, but the complexity, variation, and interesting level design the missions that started in Chapter 3 genuinely surprised me. How it all fit together with gaining some autonomy in the story also made the missions have much more impact on me. I agree, and it also feels like most of the parts start unlocking, like, you know, in the kind of trickle of stuff that they're giving you. In 3, suddenly you have like a lot to work with.
Yeah, and it's like the rhythms of the missions definitely change, even though like I think by this point you're kind of conditioned to the like the almost video gamey thing of like, oh, you reach the objective, but that's not all, where it's like you're always expecting the like, wait, I hear someone coming, it's a boss. And it's like the missions where that didn't happen, I was like, that's when I was pleasantly surprised, is when there wasn't like an extra like, okay, you have no repair kits left and this could be a one and doneer, and they don't hit you with the like, but wait, there's one more guy. Those were the ones where I was like, oh wow, okay, so you guys thought about pacing a little bit here. And so yeah, I also like how I forget which one it is, where you're attacking the spaceport and then defending it. I thought those two were missions that felt like, oh, the game feels very different because this is not like a normal mission in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. Though with the theme of unlocking a bunch of stuff, here is something that I want to bring up that I'm curious on y'all's take, particularly Renata's here. Amos Dragon says the customization is fantastic when it comes to decals and colors. It falters a bit when it comes to the parts proper. Those aren't drastically different from one another, so you can easily settle on a few select parts and rock that for the rest of the game. They go on to talk about your the weapons, which you can kind of do the same thing in, but it's around when I had like 7 different just normal biped legs that I was kind of thinking, like, am I selecting these on anything other than just what's the best weight to like armor thing? You know, like it kind of felt like I just picked the guns that I wanted, and then I was like, okay, what's the closest I can get with my leg pick to the guns that I want to hold? And I feel like I'm missing some complexity there.
I'm begging people to hit the additional stats button. I'm begging you to hit the additional stats button so you can understand what parts do. Because I've seen a lot of people like talking about boosters and talking about FCI. This game does have contextual menus for explaining what all of the stats mean. But I was talking with a friend of mine, Daven, about our mutual love of reverse jointed legs and different generators that work, different generators and boosters that are better suited to reverse jointed legs. So if you imagine 2 legs with the exact same weight, exact same weight and power, right? The thing that'll actually be different about them is how much force they apply when initially kicking off the ground. What is their jump power, right? And so that jump stat is not immediately surfaced to you. You have to open the additional menu, but sometimes can make a massive difference. There are boosters that a thing that this game doesn't show you when you're picking out a booster initially is what its reload time is. What the cooldown time on that specific, because not all boosters are made the same. There are boosters that I believe the BSTG2 PO4, if I'm remembering correct, has a 0.5 second reload time, or a reload time of 0.5 or 0.4, while the gills have a 0.3. And like all of those stats are extremely important to like, you know, once you get past the point of like, oh, can I equip the weapons that I need? Like there is a lot of dialing in to do as like, okay, how do I get this to feel the exact way I need it to so that like the weapons I'm using have the right momentum and support? Arms are another really important part for this, where like, are your arms actually good at aiming weapons or not? Is like a very important question that you should like look at before you like put together a build.
Yeah, and it's like I definitely on the like, okay, what's the most guns that my weight can handle, right? And so like I'm looking at, I think so far I've only gotten 2 tetrapod, which is basically what I've stuck with for most of the game. And so like there I have like the lighter tetrapod and the heavier tetrapod, and that's like all just based on like, okay, the bigger one can handle more stuff, so I can put bigger guns on. And so yeah, there are definitely like a lot of like stats like, you know, what is the reload time on your weapons and what kind of targeting system you're using that are not immediately surfaced in a way that I think the game has so much space on the screen that already you're kind of inundated with a lot of stats that you're not entirely sure what they mean unless you use the context help by pressing like the back button or whatever. And then to have that second menu where it just displays all this additional information is definitely like, it can be overwhelming. And so that and like the way targeting works is definitely I think the 2 biggest impediments to like really understanding the game.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes from like maybe not having enough information to pulling up that second screen of stats. I do kind of want which one of these should I really pay attention to? Which is kind of, you know, that's what the first screen is supposedly saying, but it's like I find it, there are so many stats that I find it hard to adequately weigh 18 different things, you know.
You like the problem is that like you are the person who decides what you have to be paying attention to. Like that is the thing at the end of it. So like for, you know, one of the boosters that I was looking at, the current boosters I have on Dog with Wings give you no dash support with your melee attacks. That is a particular, so like those boosts, if I put on a different boosters, my melee attacks would feel completely differently just by changing the boosters. And like, that doesn't matter if you don't use melee weapons. That stat literally does not matter to you at all if you use melee weapons. And so like, how do you determine what a given player is going to like need to see in that way?
Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely like a lot of very, very like minute details that kind of key you into, you can alter the feel of this game in almost any way. So something like what Ren was saying about like, because sometimes it felt like before I understood even what stats went into this, there was like a feeling when I was using the pile bunker early on of like, sometimes it feels like I am covering such a large distance to pile bunker somebody, and sometimes it doesn't feel like this attack has any range at all. And so like until I figured out that there are stats that control that, it felt kind of random, right? And so like there's a lot, and realizing that is something that was not just like a feel thing, but something I can modify is that like gives you a sense of how deep you can go on the customization thing. And I think that's gonna sit with players differently depending on how much time they actually want to spend on their builds and how much they thought they needed to.
Yeah, I think that's it is true. I also do think it is, you know, it as accessible as I think this game actually is in a lot of ways. There is a feeling of looking at that stat screen and just being like, oh my god, which which, you know, to the game's credit, I think you can mostly do without as well. Like you can get pretty far only, you know, being like, I want 2 shotguns. What legs can hold 2 shotguns and my missile launchers? But as we get into new game pluses and pluses, I look forward to really dialing it in.
Yeah, and not to necessarily compare it too much to Dark Souls games, but like I think this is actually a huge benefit of the community that has come around from these games, in that I think a lot of the way you're just going to learn this stuff, like you shouldn't necessarily feel like, oh, all of this should be intuitive, which is, to some degree, it's the game's fault for not surfacing that stuff as much as it should maybe. But there's also an aspect of like, don't be afraid to ask questions about this stuff, where it's like, I don't understand how this system works. It's like there's already such a community built around like, okay, I don't understand how this system works, or like I need something that does this, right? Like the community that has sprung around like basically wikifying these entire games like from start to finish, I think it like serves this game better for having like now coming on in the wake of something like all the other From games, to the extent that like people like you're going to learn through trial and error how everything feels, and don't feel like you are in charge of understanding it, and just like understand that there are just things in this, like the equivalent of like, I don't understand what any of the lore in Dark Souls mean. It like that translates into like, I don't understand the degree to which I can modify all this stuff. And so like asking around and having that be communal knowledge, I think is helping this game a lot, actually.
Just real quick, if you'd like several thousand words about that exact topic, maybe pay attention to my Twitter account at the end of this week.
Kaz asks, are you all naming and saving your mechs to AC data? I've got a couple I've made and saved as MK1 and MK2 that I always bring out for certain missions or arena battles. This has become the Gundam game I've always wanted. If I can modify Kaz's question, I'm saving builds, but then I unlock parts that would be better on those saved builds. And so then I have to go, I'm like, okay, here's my big tank explodey guy, but then I unlock an even better big tank explodey weapon. And so I go back to that saved part list, and then I put like a new arm cannon on him and I save him again. Are y'all like continuously modifying them, or are you just making new builds, or are you just kind of, you have one build and you just modify it as need be?
Yeah,
and
I'm definitely
like naming all of yours.
Yeah, you have a whole lore wiki behind like, oh, this is the double Zeta versus the regular Zeta, or like this is, yeah, I'm definitely like a Ship of Theseus guy, where it's just like I have one build that I'm just continually tweaking, because I believe like I'm always the kind of person who is, I would rather continue to invest in being better at the build that I already have than to modify my build, which is, I think, indicative of the kind of player that I am, where it's just like, I always assume that with more effort, I'll just do it, instead of like giving in and saying like, I just need to tweak the build more. I need to figure out the alternative, and not like insist that I have the answer already and find another answer. And so now, yeah, it's just basically like, what's the most nimble that I can be with dual Gatling guns and dual grenade launchers was a lot of what I was looking for as I played through most of the game. And I feel like I do need to kind of vary stuff up and look at different parts more often.
I mean, I love to fiddle with these builds, but like also what has been happening is I play until I think that I am getting a little bit tired of a certain play style, and then I go to my parts list and I'm like, okay, cool. How do I build what is the coolest, most interesting thing I can build around this other play style that still like fits what I'm interested in? So like, recently, my build progression was White Raven V2, which was dual Ludlows, then on to Borrowed Wings, named after a phrase used in the Chapter 3 mission, where you fight the other pilot named Raven. So after that, I renamed my mech Borrowed Wings, and Borrowed Wings used a Zimmerman, an assault rifle, a pile bunker, and the Songbird's cannons. Basically, it was designed to be a mid to close range fighter that was like a real skirmisher. Eventually, as I got into Chapter 4, I started realizing that I really wasn't doing much with that assault rifle, and wasn't doing anything with it. And so I decided to completely rebuild the mech around a new concept. This time, that concept was relentless aggression, which is how I got to Dog with Wings. Which is both a gesture at your character, a dog with wings, but also the fact that like I wanted an AC that felt like fighting a dog, that was just like charging at you over and over again and like relentless. And so like for me, changing builds is, I don't do it to like get through a boss fight. I do it to like adjust how I am expressing myself through play. What is the most interesting way for me to do a fight? What is the most fun way for me to do a fight? Not like, what is the most like immediately powerful, has kind of been my approach.
Gates of Kel wrote, I fell off using Pile Bunker for a while because the punish windows on staggered foes was getting too tight for me to get in range. But when I unlocked the Laser Lance, everything changed. The Lance and Pile Bunker work so well together because if you stagger an enemy AC with the Lance, you're usually in perfect position to pull out the Pile Bunker and one-shot them. I've killed so many bosses in seconds. I have never thought of that, but that's because also it's like you can only put melee slots on one hand, and so I'm kind of like, oh, you can't dual wield melee things, but you can put it in your weapon bay, which is, I assume, what they're doing here. That sounds awesome.
I mean, that is what Dog with Wings does. Dog with Wings uses a pile bunker. So actually, no, it's not a pile bunker. It's specifically the chainsaw that you get from, oh God, what's his name? Invincible Rummy. It's called Double Trouble. And so Double Trouble in the left hand, and then in addition to that, I also have the Taiyang Shou, which is the missile thrower. Sorry, not the missile thrower, the like explosive thrower, the thing where you just like swing your arm and a bunch of explosions follow behind it. I use that.
It kind of feels like you're being like a mech magician. You're just like throwing shit out and being like, sand. You're confused.
It's pocket sand. It's legit. It's mech pocket sand, which is why I wanted to use it for my rip and tear build, is because it just feels so incredibly mean to use.
Yeah. I definitely had like a similar build going of just like relentless aggression, because like the miniguns are perfect for that, because like it's like my biggest issue when I was using a lot of like shotguns and grenade launchers was just the really nimble builds who could just dodge out of the way. But then it like what I ended up doing is just like firing those as like the lead almost, and to get them to dodge, and then just close the distance with miniguns. And like miniguns will wreck you so quickly at range that, okay, you've already exhausted your dodge, and so I'm just going to lay into you with like dual grenade or with dual miniguns. And so like I basically reversed my strategy, where at first I was trying to stagger people with the miniguns and then go with like the more single target grenade launchers. But then I inverted it. So like, oh, 2 railguns to stun you, and then I lay into you with the miniguns, which are more adaptable, because it's not like the pile bunker where it's like, oh, if I miss this shot, I'm just completely screwed. And so, yeah, there was a lot of like just constant pressure through, and by being tanky and just saying like, if you and I are just going to stand close to each other and just trade blows, I'm going to come out on top because I have way more armor than you. But I feel like, are we all using weapon bay like dual, like 4 weapon builds? Because I feel like anytime I tried to adapt by like changing to like the heat-seeking missiles or anything like that, missile pods and stuff, I don't feel like those were ever super effective.
I don't use the weapon bay too much. I like my back weapons, and there are a lot of questions. Frog Heaven asks about OP builds. Ben Shively asks about like having a tank build with dual plasma rifles and dual laser cannons and being able to destroy anything. There are a lot of ways to break the game, and a lot of things that just do feel kind of quote unquote better. And for me, it's like the Songbird is just so good. The dual grenade launcher thing, that it functionally works on any build. And so like I rarely, unless I am like, if I just want to do something funky, I'll change it up. But like if I'm trying to win, the Songbird rarely leaves my back, and for the kind of second half of this section, I had a Songbird and I had the back-mounted charge shotgun that I would basically, like, that was my thing where once I broke stance, I would let that shotgun go and it would just take off like half their health bar.
I just started equipping that for my laser weapon build. I was trying to figure out how to get the energy weapon like build I was looking for right, and I ended up doing the laser shotgun, the hand laser shotgun, and a back-mounted laser shotgun, the laser lance, and then a pulse buckler was my first attempt at it, because I was kind of going for like a knight thing. I was kind of going for like a laser knight style thing, because I thought it would be fun. I was right, it is. But I ended up actually switching out the diffuse laser cannon for the stun needle launcher. because the stun needle launcher is just a really sick weapon, and it feels very jousty to me. It feels like a very jousty weapon, and so I'm like, yeah, of course the knight uses the very jousty weapon in addition to her lance. That's so fun.
Yeah, it's also one of the sickest looking things on your shoulder. It's just a giant secondary can, and when I found out that you can buy another, because you get one automatically to kill the ice worm, but realizing that you can buy another one and have like dual stun needles and dual miniguns, like that was like the revelation I needed to get through that chapter 4 boss, of just like, oh, if I fire these at the same time and hit the target, they're done. Like, and I will just have all the time in the world to like rush up and minigun them and just see. Like, the thing for me was like not watching a single section of the health bar disappear completely, but just watching it like melt with miniguns when they're staggered, especially if you have the OS tuning to like, there's a OS upgrade that increases the amount of damage you do while the enemy is staggered. And just like once I reset my points and put everything into that, just watching like I forget what the name of the chapter 4 boss is, like just watching that health bar melt completely was such a satisfying feeling.
Yeah, it is. One of the interesting things I find about builds in this game is like I can make a build that is too smart for me to use. You know, essentially that it feels like the ceiling is, in a very mech way, the ceiling is my brain and not the capabilities. And that's sometimes what I find with the weapon bays is like I'm kind of a player who just like pushes a lot of buttons, you know, even in like the Souls games and whatever, which I think I'm good at. And you know, the action is very deliberate. My like number of inputs per minute is always kind of frantic. And there are builds that are just so complicated with the different things I'm charging and swapping out and whatever that like I will get confused as to what I'm doing. And so it's one of the things that it's like, God, I can't wait to watch like speed runs or challenge runs of this game, because it does feel like the ceiling for how effective your mech can be is kind of only limited by like your mental capacity to use all your tools at the same time.
Yeah, I definitely have lost plenty of runs to like, oh, I fired the wrong weapon and it's not reloaded yet, and so I just didn't have the enough pressure during the stagger window to actually close the seal the deal here. And then I found out that the right bumper on my Xbox controller is kind of broken, and that sometimes it just won't register an input, and so like. That I definitely had to like do some controller maintenance just to like actually beat that chapter 4 boss.
That's part of your character's canon now.
Exactly. Yeah. The button's not working.
Ren, too smart for you to use. Have you attempted anything like this? Or are you just one with your mech at this point?
I am increasingly one with my mech. However, I was running the chapter 4 boss today to test that energy weapons build earlier when I first woke up this morning. And the thing that I found was that like using that build properly required charging, I believe, 3 weapons simultaneously while also managing a shield, such that like I could start to feel like, oh no, I'm like fucking up these inputs. Like I am firing the wrong weapon first, et cetera, et cetera. And I ended up tweaking it just a little bit. But the thing I actually really like is that like you can the difference between viable and like optimized in this game is so great that I cannot it wants you to get to that second stage with your specific build, because like that's what S ranking fights is for. Like S ranking fights is for the distance between viable and optimized.
Yeah.
And I love it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of like when you're using similar weapons that aren't entirely this, like, so for a while I was running dual railguns, and you know I was running Curtis and Harris, which feels like something someone would name their arms or something. But they have different charge times, and one of them I don't think can fire outside of being charged. And so that was definitely a build where it's like, together, I can, like, when they're both charged, they will immediately stagger an enemy because I can let go of both triggers, and they will like buffer the commands immediately and fire both of them off consecutively, and that felt really good. But sometimes I realized I hadn't charged one long enough, and so like that was definitely like this build is probably like better than I can handle almost, because it's like the kind of variation in inputs of I need to charge this weapon for this long and this one for slightly longer definitely led to some muscle memory like like crossed wires essentially. So I had to switch out to something. And then so having the stun needle lasers that are both identical and both don't need to be charged, but just have like a reload time. That was like definitely like in Destiny there are these things called dad builds. Where it's just like, this is effective enough for most people to just, it's also like really simple to pull off. And so it's not as effective as it could be, but it's like most people are, this is as good as you're going to get. And so that was definitely like almost like a dad build feel of like, yes, this build could be better, but I'm not interested in like the amount of precision that requires.
Yeah. Just some customization notes. Gabe B said they made a few color palettes to make all their ACs look in line with Death Stranding, which is awesome. Nikki B said, I've been spending a ton of time with my daughter building out custom stickers to add onto the mechs. I've been looking up clip art designs for animals and trying to replicate them in the editor, which is so cute.
So I have been doing my own version of that. My partner helps me with my color schemes. Like my partner, and like last night, her mom is visiting us right now. And her mom was like, gave me some feedback on one of the color schemes. I was like, thanks, Dina. Much appreciated.
No, my partner refers to the mech's girlfriend arm, where she was like, you should make that one neon green. And I was like, okay. And so like the neon green arm is the girlfriend arm of my mech.
That's very cute.
Very Bionic Commando 2008.
Oh no. The literal girlfriend arm.
Yeah.
Felix says, I know this will never happen, but if you could get DLC core parts from your favorite mech series from any medium, which would you die for? My immediate thought was, I just want Metal Gear arms. I want like the Metal Gear Ray, like weird flipper things, because I feel like the least customizable part is like what the arms look like when they're extended, and I wish I could just turn them into giant swords and hit people with them.
They used to have weapon arms like that, actually. I don't believe this game has any weapon arms, but that did used to be a thing.
Yeah, I feel like it's less. I mean, there's the obvious, like, I just wish I could make my mech's head look like a Zaku. But I would prefer a sound pack. You know how like Resident Evil will do the like, classic sound pack. I would want one that just makes them all like the distinctive Gundam noises. There's very few actual parts that I would want to swap out, but like in terms of the noises that they make, that's where I want my nostalgia. It's just like the very distinctive laser beam sound would be awesome.
I also think it'd be funny. I don't know if y'all saw the like people have already modded CJ from GTA into the game as like a mech. I think I want a Tom Cruise in the Edge of Tomorrow armor. It's like, I know it wouldn't work scale wise that he would be like 30 feet tall, but just make him like running and shooting, because that movie is great. Anyway, Mecha Pig. I feel like Chapter 3 is where the game... Mecha Pig is the person who wrote in... that was kind of a non sequitur. Mecha Pig. I feel like Chapter 3 is where the game went from something I liked to something I'll be thinking about for years. The introduction of the PCA fleet put in the story into focus for me. Flying onto the bridge and taking out the first ship felt like playing an anime, and when the rest of the ships break orbit, I gasped as I saw the shape and the scale of conflict we were taking part in. Yeah, PCA... roll the F up in a truly memorable mission. Yeah, it rules. Yeah. It rules, and then you rip them out of the air. It rules.
Yeah, the part where the ship comes in, it's just like, just destroy it then. Like if it's gonna come in here, it's like, because I think this is the mission where you're defending the missiles, right?
No, it's before that, where you're just fighting kind of a squad on the ground.
Right, okay.
And then the PCA comes in with the big lasers and kind of
and
destroys
it kills
all
everyone,
them.
Yeah. And then you have to basically climb up to a ship and destroy its like main like cabin or whatever, like the central like area where everyone is. That's a very, very good moment of like, oh, you get to just blow up this entire battleship.
Well, I will say that I'm with Surreal, and like the more memorable moment for me was them deploying multiple at once in a couple of missions. The one of them being the defend the missile mission, the other one being attack the old spaceport, where 6 just show up on the horizon. And like what was originally like, oh no, a PCA warship showed up. You're just like, oh, I know how to dismantle. I can dismantle 6 of these easy.
Yeah, these things have the most obvious weak point possible.
Let me take my chainsaw hand and jam it through the window. Like, what are you gonna do?
Something that I really like about how these ships work. It's a very specific detail, but like when they arrive, they are just moving in real space so fast. Like it's kind of, you could kind of think of another game where it's like they exit light speed and suddenly they're on the map and they're slow. But in this, they're going really fast up until like the middle of the map, and then they kind of slow down so you can get on them. But like in replays of missions where I know where they're going to be, I'm kind of like flying up to prepare for them, and then they just come screaming under me at like 1,000 miles an hour, and they like, it really feels weird to just see like that big of an in-game object moving that quickly.
Yeah, and it's so cool to watch like what is, you see them in the distance and they just feel like these impossible, like these superimposing forces, and then realizing, yeah, you can just get on top of them and basically one-shot them with most weapons is like such a cool, like, I'm just gonna find the weak point and destroy you completely is such a good moment.
Okay, that defend the missiles mission that you brought up earlier. It's a dumb question. Are the missiles being shot at the PCA?
No. Well, yes, and no. They're being shot at the Dozers faction, the Coyotes, who are working with the PCA.
Okay, but
which is why Carla asks
helping
you. Yes.
Okay,
she
so
wants
Carla
to fuck
wants
up
to
the
take
Coyotes, who she has been fucking up this entire game. She's constantly asking you. Sorry. Oh my God, I forgot.
It's okay.
My bad. She wants you to fight the Coyotes, she's been having you fight the entire game. And they have since aligned with the PCA, which she comments on by saying, I believe, oh, it's a surprisingly smart decision for them. That's good. Good for them. That seems like the right call here.
That mission is so cool. Someone on Reddit pointed out the just the fact that they make the objective look at the explosion. You know, you launch the missiles and it's like, oh, new blue diamond on my HUD. What's that? And it's like, just watch this explode. Hey,
tourist. Etc. etc.
She loves calling you tourist. There was a person who wrote in, actually, Robin R. Writes, one of the really cool things I noticed as I was going through the game is that everyone calls you a specific name. Carla calls you tourist, Rusty calls you buddy, General Michigan calls you Gun 13, which what is your favorite nickname an NPC gave you and why? Like I said, I'm a simp for Rusty. I love being called buddy.
It's Raven. Duh. It's my whole brand. It's my whole personal brand. And also, I think the mission where they reveal to you what having that name means, because that's also like, that is like historically what that name means. Like the name Raven is tied to protagonist, and so like it is quite literally like you are taking on, in the same way that like by piloting the Gundam, you take on the cultural mantle of the Gundam. By being call sign Raven, you take on the like power and like the cultural like position of what it means to be a Raven, which is why I ended up changing my next name to Borrowed Wings. Because like I realized during that fight with the other character named Raven, we used almost identical loadouts. She also uses a Zimmerman, Songbirds, and a pile bunker. There was only one weapon difference between the two of us the first time we fought. And so, like, that fight was a real... the way that I conceptualize that fight for me is, like, that is my pilot realizing, like, this entire time, everyone's been right. They do fight like the original Raven. And like, leaning into that, like, conversation around, like, what it means to, like, take on all of these names. Because, again... these are also names that other people have had before. You are not the only person Rusty has ever called buddy. You are not the only person who Carla has ever called tourist. You know that Gun 13 just died. Like Gun 13 is a name that has been used before. All of these are titles that are not yours, but given to you. And so like it plays with legacy in some like really fascinating ways, which is why I wanted to lean in with borrowed wings and then
I was gonna
wings.
ask, did you just like jump out of your chair? Because the
Yes.
thing with as Tan says, defend the old spaceport is my favorite mission so far. I love when a mission briefing is completely wrong.
Yeah.
Where this just says like, oh, you're gonna defend the spaceport from a whole bunch of stuff, and then you get there and it's like, nope, not what this mission is. Here's Raven, and it's such a cool moment.
Yeah. That's like when they surprise you from the beginning instead of at the end, right? But yeah, like I really like I like Tourist because it kind of speaks to your role as an outsider and like how this is like basically the locals defending themselves from imperialist forces. But yeah, to what Ren said about basically you assuming a variety of identities throughout the game, I think is like a really strong narrative conceit because it just tells you that like when you get into a mech, you are donning an identity, right? And so for them, like the idea that we are different things to different people just in our everyday lives, I think is kind of like heightened here by saying like to these people, you are Gun 13, to these other people, you are, and that kind of changes the context of like who you are to these people. And knowing that like every role you have comes with the expectations of who the previous holder was, I think is like speaking to a lot of the very universal themes of mech anime, which is just like the person is the robot is controlled by the person, but the robot also controls the person, right? Because it's like when you put someone in another, like when someone steps out of one mech and into another, they have to behave differently in a lot of cases, right? So like the weapons that we wield like condition us,
Right.
In a lot of ways, and so do names.
So yeah, the thing that I sent a note into a group chat when that moment hit, which was you can't fly on borrowed wings, but you can get off the ground. Sometimes that's all you need. Which is the message I immediately posted in an AC6 group chat with a spoiler tag immediately after finishing that fight, which was tremendous.
Did you also reply? Did someone reply? Was like, you could also just use double jointed legs.
Yeah, you don't even need the wings.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I use the double jointed legs, which is why I don't need to fly. I can just jump.
Spencer B, as opposed to our previous commenter who loved defend the old spaceport, Spencer B says, attack the old spaceport has been my favorite mission. After raining destruction on multiple warships, something about blowing up parked ships is so, I mean, it just makes you feel like a weapon of war. The PCA sends in 2 ACs to bust up the party, but lo and behold, my boy Rusty swoops in to help me deliver an old-fashioned can of whoop ass on these pitiful pilot posers. Rusty and I are mech bros for life, and I would die for him. You might. Later in the story. I loved this mission. I loved how many different things happen in it. Because it's like attack the old spaceport. You get there, I essentially think of the ACs as like Star Destroyers, even though they are not quite as big. But like you're going through a ship parking lot. You are just blowing all these things up, which is really fun in and of itself. And they're like, MCs trying to stop you. And then 2 of them show up in the air and you take them down and you're like, gosh, what a cool escalation. And then there is, I'm assuming this is Ornstein and Smo, Ren.
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm talking
I guess
about the
there are a
refueling
couple.
station. Refueling station is Ornstein and Smo.
Is it possible that I didn't get that one? Is that a choice? A choice mission?
I think that in chapter 3, the choice is like between the enforcement squads and the special forces craft.
Well, yeah, but I guess the Ornstein and Smo that Ren's referring to could also be in chapter 4. I'm not sure.
No, I'm talking about the one in chapter 3. Mission 22, attack the refueling base. It's the one that I posted. There's a clip in our Discord chat of me doing that fight.
Oh, yeah. Okay. There are multiple missions in this section where 2 ACs roll up and you're like, time to go. But this one you have you have Rusty with you, so it's a little easier and feels a little more collaborative.
Well, the other thing is that this one has a sniper and someone with a spear. Like it is they do the fight that I sent, they do an attack that is literally the spear hit that Ornstein does when he raises you up and lets you like fall down on his spear.
Yeah. Okay.
That is that exact animation from the Ornstein, and also the old Dragon Slayer fight from Old Dragon Rider. That is the Old Dragon Rider fight from
2,
Dark
right?
Souls 2. Yeah, it's the same animation, or at least a motif.
I love when Rusty rolls up and I get to fight alongside him. Makes me feel cool. This was also, it was not that hard of a fight, this one, and so I think I just kind of first tried it. There's a stealth mission in this level. That's weird, right?
Yeah, it's like it's. I think there's the one where you're basically falling through the giant. I think this is in chapter 4, but yeah, there's a couple of stealth missions where you're basically just dodging stuff as you get the read, like the notification that you need to dodge and stuff, and making your way through that stuff. And I thought those were like really good ways to change things up. Like they were a nice pacing mechanism for, okay, you're not just like going in and running your build, you have to behave in a specific way. And this game, I think there's a version of this game where you do that too often and it doesn't feel like you're playing the game enough, but they intersperse them really well so that it feels like, okay, now you don't necessarily have to think about optimizing your build, you just have to do a very specific thing. And it's not super demanding, but it's like enough that you have to do what they tell you, basically.
I had trouble with this mission because I couldn't tell what could or could not detect me at first, because like some of the mechs will cause you to be alarmed, and or they'll set the alarm off and then the mission fails, and some of them don't. And sometimes I was like, are my gunshots, like, can they hear them? And it wasn't that big of a problem when I was just completing it, but there is a combat log from a tetrapod right in the middle of the map. And so, like, to get to that one, I kind of had to figure out what was going on more. But this mission also has something else that's really interesting, which is a in-gameplay choice, which is, I think, the only time that this has happened thus far. Did y'all get this part? Do you know what I'm referring to?
The whether or not that you kill the guy, and if you don't kill the guy, he leaves, and then you
and then a weeb shows up. Yeah,
I didn't fight the other guy. I just killed that dude. Listen, like I'll kill any Vesper, anyone except for V4 Rusty. Like all those dudes dead to me.
Well, so it's you can actually, this is a choice that you can alter on replays, unlike the choice missions, which are you just have to wait until the next New Game Plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you go up, you're fighting this mech. It gets really mad at you that you surprise it, which is funny. But then at some point, it's just like, wait, we can work this out. You want to let me go? And there's actually like almost like a dialogue choice that pops up on your screen that says yes or no. And you can click yes, and you just stand around for a while. And then that dude from the arena shows up, who's like the guy who loves Shinobi, like is his description.
Yeah.
And his
really
like,
into
AI,
old feudal Japan ninja stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like his AI is always trying to kick you, which I think is really funny. But I was like, where's this guy in the game? And then he shows up if you wait. And I just like, it's both funny, like it's kind of a funny gag to let someone go and then someone else just rolls in, but also I just found it like unusual, and I wonder if there will be more sections like that as we go on, because like having that just like in-game non-flagged choice, I was surprised to learn that it was even possible.
Yeah, it's like it feels weird because you haven't done it before, and it's like the idea of you making a choice because everything is like you are being assigned missions and you go on them and then you get paid is definitely like the theme of the game. And so to have like, well, now you have to do some on the fly thinking is like not something the game has even tasked you with, because even when you're choosing missions, it's just like you have one, like it's all kind of within the realm of like, yeah, like you're gonna have to make a choice, but it's like you're kind of doing the same thing either way, and then the mission still converges in the same way, where it's like the mission after that it still kind of assumes, because there's like the one choice where basically I think Rusty does the other one, and then you like then you fight Rusty. And so it's almost like within acceptable parameters of choice, right? By the systems of the game. But this one feels like you are in uncharted territory just by having to make this very minor decision.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like that is one thing is worth noting is that like it's important that this happens in chapter 3 because like again, that's where you learn what call sign Raven means. It means to be one who chooses, right? Like it means to be one who chooses how history moves. To be more than a gun, to be a gun with like intention. And so like I think that it's very fun that all of that stuff like starts to kick in that same chapter.
Speaking of gun with intention, choosing missions, did y'all fight Cataphract?
Damn
because
right
this
I
was,
did.
I loved Cataphract, and this is one that you could miss if you chose a different one. Suriel, this is the one that looks like it's on tank treads, but actually has like a little guy in the middle that's running around.
No, I don't think I did. I don't think I did fight this guy. Are they in the arena?
No, this is a optional mission, I believe. You have to.
Yeah.
What choices did you make?
I went with. I think I did eliminate the enforcement squads and intercept the red guns.
Yeah, so you did not fight Cataphract.
The first one you did instead of. Do you remember anything about that mission? I'm curious to do it on the next playthrough.
The eliminate the enforcement squads?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't remember. Like, you'd have to remind me what exactly that one was.
Well, I don't know because I didn't play that mission, but there's one that sounded like a boss, and I was like, well, I don't want to miss the boss. And it turns out that Cataphract is the funniest looking boss because it is this very fast tank that comes in.
I'm looking at photos of it now. Yeah.
But then its weak point is it just has a normal AC between the treads, and you just shoot that, and it like staggers immediately. But there's some interesting dialogue in this mission that I'm curious if you get a similar version in the other one, where that tank realizes that we are not the original Raven. And then Air also has some lines that are kind of like, wait, what's going on? Like, who are you? In a way that I wasn't sure what to make of, because I didn't think that she thought we were the original Raven, but she seemed confused.
I believe, yeah, this is news for her, because you were introduced to her as call sign Raven immediately after the Coral Surge, and like that is the only name that because the last person who says for whom the game is like, hey, you don't seem to be who you say you are, is first V4 Rusty and then Sula. Sula recognizes you as one of Handler Walter's hounds, and from that point forward, Aerie, like, she just takes you on the next 3 missions. Handler Walter doesn't speak to you at all for like 3 missions there, and it's just Air. And so, like, I think I'm actually not that surprised that she does not realize that until that moment.
This is also a mission where Walter starts to get very defensive of us. Like when other people are showing disrespect, he says, he's like, show Hound some respect. And he also says that Gen 4 is as good a pedigree as any other. And there is the stuff about the different gens, I think, is really fascinating, because it's never like Gen 1, they did this. Gen 2, they did this. But like you can kind of figure out from the arena like what's going on. And there is some indication that like Gen 1 had like a 10% survival rate or something, and then like by Gen 10 it seems kind of not that invasive compared to what the earlier generations had to go through, and it is just cool to think about.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about that worm. There's a worm in this game, and it first shows up after you fight the 2 guys with Rusty, and it just wrecks shop for a while, and then you fight it, and it's unbelievably cool. Swiggity Swooty said, when I first booted up the Destroy the Ice Worm mission and saw that you were accompanied by 3 other ACs, I thought, it's like Mech Monster Hunter. With best buddy Rusty arming the rail cannon and muttering some great lines, I believe we have one of the best boss fights of the year right here. Ethan P. says, oh, so a natural resource with psychic properties and now a giant snow worm. This will totally fill the hole caused by Dune Part 2 getting delayed.
Yeah, that is definitely like the most set PC boss in the game, in that like, yeah, you are fighting it with multiple teams. And then of course, once you get it down low enough, it's just like everyone else is going to die. It's up to you, which is a very cool conceit for any boss fight.
I cannot remember. It is certainly not that there haven't been cool moments in other From games, because there obviously have. They make very cool looking things, but like the intentionality of like, this is going to look cool above everything else. Like the way that Railgun looks and animates, and the hit stop that we, mentioned last year, and Rusty's lines as he shoots it is just kind of unbelievable. I mean, Lewis K wrote in with the, sighting correction, A-OK, 90, 95. I won't miss. Boom. Is just like, I can't believe it. I've played that mission like 6 times now, and it's still so cool.
Yeah, the fact that like you all need to cooperate to make sure this thing goes down. Of like, you have to destroy this thing. You have to hit it in the face with the stun needle, and I think you need to do it once initially, and then later on the shield gets stronger, so you have to do it twice. And then like, not only do you have to destroy that shield, there's like Rusty has to stagger it for you. And so you're kind of just waiting around and trying to figure out where the thing is going to pop up so that you can be in the right place at the right time. It's very like, not cinematic, but it feels very event driven in a way that other fights are not, right?
Well, it's especially event driven depending on what weapon you used. I used the pile bunker here, which meant that when this thing got knocked down, I just jammed a spear into its face. And like that, punching this thing in the face and then just watching it reel is like, again, one of my favorite feelings of like any game this year.
Yeah, it's also the stagger window. It's just long enough that like you can do a pile bunker, but then what else? And so like, it's like you're almost like, this is your opportunity to fire off everything, right? Of like, this is you need the stun needle just to be there. But it's like, this is almost the chance that you've been waiting all game for, of just like, if I just had a good moment to lay into something, what is the like maximum damage output that I can get? And this boss gives you that opportunity, because it's like, it's going to have a ton of health anyway, so you're not going to kill it in one go. But like, you get to lay in everything you have on this thing. The stagger window is that long.
Yeah, Luke Tucker says big Neon Genesis Evangelion vibes with the Ice Worm mission. This is my favorite Eva episode is the one where they hook up all of the city's power to the one sniper rifle to shoot the angel. Like that's my favorite bit of the show.
Of that show. It's so good.
There's a desperation of like, if this doesn't work, we're all screwed. That is going on here, and then eventually like everyone but you is basically screwed, and they all have to bow out one at a time in a way that's like, this is you are getting through that fight. Even if you like ace it, the narrative of that fight is you are getting by this fight by the skin of your teeth.
Yeah. It's also something that I found fascinating, especially in these second parts, is how kind of casual the two corporations are in communicating with each other. It is this very like corporate violence thing where like they'll like compliment each other's pilots, when like Rusty is shooting stuff off, one of the dudes from the Red Guns is like, hey, pretty good, ever think about switching sides? And it's just like weird to hear that when it's like, that they would kill each other without hesitation, or at least like the generals were, and Rusty would have commanded to do so. But it's just like, it is that weird like friendliness among adversaries, and this whole mission being like everyone's working together because we need to kill this ice worm before we can start killing each other again.
Yeah, and I think like, even though I think the kind of arc of this game is to say that like kind of cold-hearted mercenary work is like not a good idea, I think that like this shows you the other side of that, of just like, yeah, because these people are so mercenary, when the objective is like, we have to work together, they're just like, yep, this is just another, like, these are just the parameters of the mission. And so even though this very strange thing of these like competing corporations having to work together is happening, all of these people are kind of used to the idea that like, you flip the kind of friend or foe switch on a dime depending on what is going on. And so it's like, yeah, it's not this is the advantage that they have of like, yeah, it's not personal. So like, of course I'm going to like banter with someone who like tomorrow I'll probably have to kill.
Well, I mean, this all comes to a head in the chapter 4 mission. I believe it's the chapter 4 mission where Rusty hunts you down. Or Rusty has been like tracking you, and basically the corporation sets you both up to kill each other.
Yeah. I was curious if that differed depending on which mission you picked. Because there's basically there is a choice to either fight the Red Guns or fight the Vespers. And I chose to fight the Red Guns because I thought, I don't want to kill Rusty. A fool is me.
Oh yeah, I killed the shit out of the Vespers. Rubicon Liberation Front all the way. Those Vespers are beyond dead.
Yeah, I chose the I think earlier I said the Red Guns, but I think I chose the Vespers. Yeah, just because I don't like the Vespers. But yeah, I think I'm pretty sure you fight Rusty, and I think the implication is he basically takes care of the other mission. But now I'm pretty sure like Rusty's a Vesper, so I don't know who takes care of the Vespers if you choose the Red Guns.
Well, the leader of the RLF, like he was like that whole scene is that the leader of the Rubicon Liberation Front doesn't really need you there, but was like, I want to see if you're really all you're cracked up to be, and then you obliterate those two guys, and he's like, okay, yeah.
There's Nelson A wrote in, said, if you side with Arquebus in Chapter 4, you'll fight Michigan and the Red Guns in a mission. This mission features G1 Michigan and like 40 MTs in a small circular arena, and I kept running out of ammo before I killed them all and failing, which happened to me almost. I finished it with like a missile launcher. I finally beat the mission with dual flamethrowers, which I never would have thought I'd have a use for. I liked how during the mission, Michigan was talking us up to the other Red Guns, warning them not to underestimate us. I felt like that added some nice character depth. I think it's a bad trope in video games that your enemies never take you seriously. Yeah, I like that too. Also, there's some weird mechanics versus plot stuff going on in this mission, where if you choose like I'm not sure what the totals end up being, but the one that I chose where you kill all the Red Guns, you get like 4 times as much money for doing that as you do for choosing the other mission, which is maybe some good like WLF versus corporate incentive structure.
Yeah. And I actually kind of like the kind of, even though there's that conflict, I think I kind of actually like the coherency of that choice, because it's either like it imparts that like the corporations who have no affiliation to any particular cause are ultimately interchangeable, and the only constant is like anyone who has an actual investment in the conflict, which is the RLF. Like the people who live here and are trying to like fight their oppressors are the only ones with a real cause. And so like this choice is basically telling you that one way or the other, it doesn't matter what corporation you choose. The only thing that matters is actually having a purpose. And so like I like that kind of coming together of the game's themes and mechanics that's going on there.
Simon K wrote, I am really enjoying the juxtaposition of the protagonist arc in AC compared to previous Soul games. In Souls games, you were made to feel like nothing and are constantly reminded of this with every death. In AC6, you start as a nameless mercenary, but eventually build up your reputation as a feared warrior. This all comes to a head in the Chapter 4 mission, Intercept the Red Guns, when Michigan says, you're talking about the wall climber, the worm killer, the only Gun 13 who's managed to live this long. That moment was totally awesome and badass. It is funny where, like, as you are slaughtering everyone, Michigan is like, this is what you get for not taking this guy seriously. We're all gonna die.
Well, I will say one thing. I do resist the notion that like the Souls games do not treat you as like the Wunderkind God Killer. That you explicitly are the Wunderkind God Killer, and everyone reminds you constantly. Like, yes, they do. They are like, dreadful tarnish, but they also call you a lord. Like, and you, the whole thing about those games is conquering those fights. Is proving how much more powerful you are than everyone else. Like, I don't think that these are being deployed to different affects.
I don't know. I kind of... No one screams when they see me coming in Souls games. You know, like, that is a fundamentally different experience here. I look, other than Mikołash, I can't really think of, you know, it's like, the boss is always the thing that you should be terrified of, and even standard enemies, you know, it's like you can kill them easily, but the experience of hearing radio chatter of people yelling like, oh my god, we're all gonna get killed by this thing, I do feel is fairly unique to AC.
Well, yeah, but there's also, I will say, Maiden Estrella is like not quite to that level of. It's not constant. It is a Maiden Estrella is a standout moment. But I do
Sure,
not
and I think that's why it's so good.
Right. Yeah. I would resist the notion. People say that the Souls games are about disempowerment a lot, and I do not think that that is true. And I would just resist that framing.
I think it's like a question of, you know, in Dark Souls, a lot of that is opaque, and you have to learn what your role in the world is by like reading text and like a lot of the time looking up wiki stuff. And I think the difference is that Armored Core makes that way more explicit by just outright telling you that that's what's happening, right? Because in Dark Souls, it's like you have a prophecy of like, okay, you're the person who's going to, you know, by Dark Souls 3, it's like you're going to defeat you from Dark Souls 1, right? Who has been built up as like the Lord of Cinder. But here it's like, it's very immediate that it's like, no, like you have it by the end of this game, you have a reputation as the mercenary that's getting everything done. And people are talking about you in a way that people don't necessarily even talk at all in Dark Souls games outside of like, okay, I heard from this one guy, and also very explicit, like, oh, in this diary entry, people will mention that this is the prophecy and either you're going to rekindle the flame or not. But in here, it's like you're hearing it directly as you're fighting these people, what they think of you.
There's an interesting data log you can find in this section, written by the Liberation Leader, that has just some strange lines in a very Soulsy way that I wasn't sure quite what to make of. Where he wrote like, "Fear not, there will always be plenty, as I was imbibing Rubicon's blessings," which kind of sounded somewhat like being, I don't know, like taken by the coral or being kind of possessed by, imbibing blessings is a strange way of writing something.
That's a very Dark Soulsy, like, we're going to tell you what we're doing, but we're going to be really creepy about it too.
Don't forget the furtive pygmy. And then he said, "How long has it been since I first saw her voice?" And so I was like, is he talking about Ayers or Irie, or like, is this voice in multiple people's heads is still something that I'm not fully clear on.
I think there are multiple choral beings. Like, there are multiple choral entities that have manifested and like ushered people to act throughout various points throughout history. I believe, in fact, that depending on how you read Walter either has one in his head or is, the last scientist remaining of the original people who initially caused the fires of Ibis.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that I really like about it so far is that like both readings are like right there for the player.
There is some big Walter work happening right at the end of chapter 4, where he says, "Let me tell you a story," which is like a fascinating thing for someone in his position to say.
One of my favorite ways to start a monologue. I think someone looking at you and going, "Let me tell you a story," is just like such a banger. It works every time on me. I go, "Yes, I would love to hear a story, sir."
Yes. It's funny you mentioned that because like, I don't know if either of you have played El Shaddai. Ascension of the Metatron. It was like this very obscure action game from like, I think 10 years ago. And it's
it's like stylish. The one thing I know about is it's beautiful, right?
Yes, and it's like this weird world where like you're fighting, like there's a lot of very Christian origin myth stuff of like, oh, you're fighting Gabriel, and they just, for some reason, everyone's wearing designer jeans and stuff. But it's like that game begins with a guy with a very like deep voice saying, "Let me tell you a tale," and it's like that line that's the only thing from that game that's stuck in my head is the way that guy starts that story with "Let me tell you a tale." And so, yes, Brent is right. That is a very evocative way to start a story, is by outright telling you it's a story.
So before we jump into chapter 4, I want to just touch on some random notes that we have from the community. The whole Hamdamily asks something that is a good question. I'm having trouble landing on how I want to aim, if that makes sense. there are a lot of options for the targeting systems alone, but on top of that, you have the lock-on versus not locking on and the manual aiming OS upgrade. I've seen a recent video that not locking on can actually result in greater target acquisition of your weapons. But then you have the problem of keeping the enemy in frame. It sounds like a silly question, but how have you all been going about aiming at things?
Yeah, I definitely had an arc where I realized I didn't know how to properly lock on until the chapter 4 boss, where it's like you click the right stick and then you just kind of have to let it go, because if you manipulate it too much, it's more likely that you're going to break lock on. And so the boss that I'm just calling the Cubile, because that's basically what it is, like that was the boss that taught me that, like, just don't touch the right stick when you're locking on and you'll actually have better target acquisition. And because you get to watch that thing move, even though it'll still break lock on. But realizing that late in the game, I was like, I've been an idiot this entire time.
Well,
but it is true that as they referenced, locking on as opposed to kind of keeping the enemy centered with using the right stick.
Yeah.
Like, you do hit more, or your tracking is more accurate if you are not locked on, but kind of only to the extent that you could keep it on screen at all.
Well, because what we're talking about two different things here. We're talking about lock on as in camera lock, locking your camera onto a target, but we're also talking about weapons lock here. And the idea of your weapons being locked on a target are two different things. And I think that people, one of the things that's happening is people are struggling to tell what is happening.
When they're going to hit, yeah.
And when they're going to hit, but also, like, what of the various things is causing them to miss? Is it are you not locked on? Are your arms too slow? What is the problem actually, like, rooted in? And I think that is I will say that I just use lock on and I take my thumb off the stick. Also, the whole take your thumb off the stick thing is like advice that I remember giving Patrick Klepek on stream while I watched him fight Balteus, because, like, you can't. Balteus is a real easy fight if you just take your thumb off that stick, and just accept that, like, your camera will snap to him. And I'm used to that from previous or at least AC4, where, like, there was, like, pretty soft tracking on just about everything.
Yeah. The other issue that I think people might have is that because there's, like, that cursor is so visually dense in that it kind of shows you all of your cooldowns, just so, like, your eye doesn't have to travel as much. But also this chapter 4 boss was, like, revelatory for a number of reasons, one of which is that, like, depending on your lock-on system, you have, like, a cursor that is trailing that cursor, right? And that shows you how accurate your it is like a leading shot cursor, basically, where it shows you, like, the closer that is to the enemy, the more likely you are to hit. And so, like, realizing that there is there's this basically like a second hidden cursor on the screen that you have to keep an eye on, it is not something that I had to pay attention to before, because most of the time the enemy is not moving quickly enough for that to matter. But this is definite, like, that chapter 4 boss definitely, like, made me notice that cursor of, like, oh, the closer that thing is to the actual enemy, the more likely I am to actually hit them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really, for me, it was very dependent on what weapons I was using, as well as the enemy behavior, because I should also say the FCS, which I started taking much more seriously after Renata yelled at everyone to take it seriously last episode. But it's like, if I have a chain gun, I am basically just letting it fly. I'm not waiting for an enemy to come to a stop. But, like, if I'm using songbirds, if I'm using the shotguns, whatever, it's like, you realize, kind of, using a grenade launcher, it's like they need to be standing still, or you need to be above them in order for these, like, very physical projectiles to hit, where if you're just spraying bullets, they can kind of hit anything. And that was, for me, the chapter 4 boss was, like, not... It was figuring out what points in its attack pattern it would just stand still for long enough for me to, like, hit with a slow thing. Because the difference between camera lock and not aiming, it doesn't matter if the thing is standing still. Like, you're going to hit it either way.
Right, and I think that is like basically circumventing a lot of the other systems of like, oh, your arms are just not moving fast enough to catch up with this weapon. So no, like if you fully like there's a way that you can hit it as it's flying. It's just you have to basically read all the cursors correctly, and it's just that's a lot more work than waiting for this is a very Dark Soulsy boss in that it has its attack patterns, and you kind of have like for the most part you kind of just have to wait for it to do its thing, and then react. Like, okay, now it's in the position where it's vulnerable, which you haven't had to do a lot in this game because most things it's just like you just run at them and you can just deal damage whenever. But this boss fight does not allow you to do that a lot of the time.
My editor and best friend on the planet, Tessa, was talking about this fight with me, and this is the first fight she got stuck on, and she was like, "Yeah, this fight felt like participating in a dance where you are not the lead." And that is a way in which it is different from a lot of other fights in this game, where like you are not lead here. If you want to win this fight, you have to be following. Which you kind of really love about it.
You have to respect this boss in a way that you can't. That you can just basically like oppress other bosses depending on because I think basically between the sea spider and this, like there weren't a lot of enemies that I was afraid of in terms of like, oh, I need to wait for them to do their thing and then I need to react. It was mostly I'm just running my game plan. I'm using dual miniguns and just like destroying them. And then I'm basically like every once in a while, one of them will have a sword. So I have to make sure not to get too close. But like this boss has very specific patterns that will almost immediately stagger, if not kill you outright, if you don't do what it wants you to do, which is like, dodge these like flying crescents and make sure that it's like all these lasers are not touching you because it'll just destroy you immediately.
So let's talk about it. Starkiller said, what build did the panel use to beat the Chapter 4 boss? I thought it ended up being a very Souls-like boss, and I've seen people online calling it Mechalania. Which I think is as much due to the iconography. It's a boss that shoots big red beams at you as much as the difficulty. My first kill on this was two of the what are the long range shotguns called? The one that Dog with the Wings has. Yeah. So two of those, and then one of the missile launcher that shoots two missiles, but each of those break into 8 other missiles and track them down. Those have really good tracking. And then the shoulder-mounted laser shotgun on my other shoulder. And basically, everything was good at getting it into stagger, except for the laser shotgun, which could then take off half its health. I have seen people online talking about how essentially running with 2 of the Zimmermans is kind of putting the game on easy mode. And like, I do agree they are so effective. They are so effective. But this morning, I put on that light tank tread, like the small one.
The squishy one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just freaking speed racered in circles around that thing, and none of its attacks could touch me at all. And then I was also using the 2 needle launchers, which, as we've talked about, will take off half of its health.
Yes.
Instantly.
This is the only boss where I was just like, I'm just going to look this up. I don't know. I have no idea what to do with this thing. And it's like, yeah, it's apparently like extra weak to the stun needle lasers because it is also feeding off coral the way the worm is. And so like, that's what you have to do to break that shield. And it makes sense in that way. But once I had 2 of them, that made the fight a lot easier, even though like my build was too slow to dodge a lot of that stuff. So a lot of it was just like, I'm just going to tank the cross, like the X-shaped crescents that it fires at you. I just don't know how to dodge still, but I just tank them. But yeah, it was basically I was running the stun needle lasers and two rail guns. So it's like at the beginning of the fight when it kind of does its kind of initial dance and it does the sword swing at you. Immediately after that, it was just immediate stun, and I staggered it immediately, fired those 2 needle lasers, and that was half of its health. And so I basically just ran that a few times, and that one actually was like the easiest. It was like the biggest difference in like if you run the right build, this fight can just go by incredibly quickly.
Yeah, I will say that I don't really I don't really use energy weapons that much in games generally. They're not really my whole shtick, but against the Chapter 4 boss, when I was using my energy weapon build, I did a slot in the needle launcher because like there's no other way to stagger that thing either. It's so hard to get I don't know how people who use energy weapons stagger anything ever. It's unfathomable to me. But yeah, my initial chapter 4 was with Dog with Wings. The explosive thrower does a really solid stagger damage over a pretty large area. You just have to make sure you land it. So it was Pocket Sand, Zimmerman, Songbirds, and then pull out Double Trouble and just like take off 3/4 of its health in one hit. And then I only had to get a couple of those for to win, which is fine in the first phase, less fine in the second phase.
Is this the only boss thus far that has like a second phase animation? Because I think most of the other bosses, you just kind of detect like, oh, their behavior's changing, or there's like a VO line that's like, watch out, they're about to do something big. But this one, like dying and then being like, it's
Coming
dead.
back.
No, it's not. Felt again very Soulsy.
I think it's. Does it have a second health bar?
It doesn't have a second health bar, but it does have a specific animation it does to cue that it's going into the second phase, and that you can't do standard damage to. Like it gets armor, it gets super armor during it, which to me is like, that's just the same thing without having the second bar.
Yeah. It's like the other low-key thing that bothered me about the way that happens is that like the second you down it the first time, it like kind of controls your camera and basically plays like a mini cutscene, but you can still get hit you can't control your character, but you can still get hit by those lasers and take extra damage during that short snippet. Because I was checking my health of like, oh, I have 3,500, and at the end of the cutscene I have 1,700. Like, and that's just like sometimes damage that you can't do anything about.
That's funny. Yeah. Okay. Let's rewind a little to talk about chapter 4, because most of it is just going down a big hole. That's chapter 4 is you're going down. And this one had another level that I did not love, which was the one where you just have to fall down and that thing is shooting lasers at you. Yeah, not
bad.
Not my favorite.
Bad. A classic of the AC game, at least in my experience. There's a couple of missions. There's like a handful of missions like this in AC4. But not a good classic. Just because they do it a lot does not mean that I like it.
Yeah, I actually had a really easy time with this one because I found like there's a series of basically like cross platforms, right? And so like there's railings, and I basically just like had a tetrapod and just hovered. I would basically like go through each of the railings where it couldn't hit you. So I actually like basically just slowly descended while it was like basically hitting all of its lasers to like the walls that were protecting me the whole time. So I think I ended up doing it on the first or second try.
I just, the way I did it was I just let go of the stick between the things, because if you let go of the stick, you turn off all of your boosters, which means you have nothing keeping you in the air. And so you plummet like a brick. And so you can get from level to level without getting hit because you fall so fast, but only if you take your thumb off the stick. Do you actually like fall with the correct speed to do that?
I just feel like they could turn down the tracking on those lasers like 2% and the game would not be any worse. But I do like getting to the bottom and you just get to blow its head off. Yeah. And then the second level where you're going down a big hole, you fight the Enforcer, which is truly just a transformer, like in more of a way than any other robot that we've seen in this game so far. Is like it starts on 4 legs and then it just gets up and it turns into like a Decepticon and then you fight it. I had trouble with this boss. Did y'all just steamroll it?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, it was like this is because it was close range. It was just like, yeah, I have the dual miniguns. Even I will say the one weakness of the dual Gatling guns is that they are expensive. You will run through those you will run up costs on those miniguns because they cost more per. Like basically, if you expend those weapons completely, you could run into deficit. I had one mission where I actually paid 15 grand for the privilege of using those miniguns. But they're powerful is why.
Yeah, for some reason it was like I knew what I had to do and I just wasn't I wasn't like doing enough damage while it was staggered or whatever. I should have played around more, but I was very attached to my songbirds at that point and I didn't want to give them up. But I replayed it with the chainsaw and some other stuff, and that one I managed to just kind of tear through him.
Yeah, there's definitely like that one is definitely like more susceptible to some builds than others.
Jared Pierce wrote, really loved the opening 3 underground exploration missions in Chapter 4. For all of Chapter 1, I was kind of thinking this game would be like a FromSoft game minus the best part of FromSoft games, the exploration. Good to see there's still a little bit of that in here, and it really shines in these 3, particularly the second one. Exploring deeper and deeper in this forbidden area while the AI announces it is moving its threat response level up and up was a very cool experience. These are bigger levels. There's more like hidden chests and various combat logs that you can miss in these levels.
Yeah, this is definitely like it feels like the closest to actually, like, they basically, through their mission structure, they basically do a Dark Souls area where you're kind of slowly figuring out where the boss is and making your descent into like uncharted territory. They just split it up into 3 sections.
Yeah, and I don't know. I thought, personally, these were not the most awe-inspiring missions to me. I like the being around the mega structures more. Although, you know what I really liked is the one where you have to destroy the laser grid, and then you're just stuck in that room with the other AC, and there's a timer. Where it's like it's gonna blow up in 2 minutes. Was just like a very, it's like, I don't want a timer for the whole game, but giving me a timer once is a cool little trick to play on my brain to get me extra stressed. Let's talk about the arena. Did y'all have any? So have y'all worked through all the available levels of the arena?
Yeah, there's like basically what E through S rank, and I think yesterday I cleared the last of the arena bosses, and like I cleared A and S in like a matter of like 10 minutes because it was just like all of those were one and dones.
Those S rank bosses, I don't think they deserve that rank. Especially the number 1. I was just like, really? This guy? He had kind of cool, like a cool bio that was like, yeah, doesn't use any augmentations, just likes piloting his mech around. And I was like, wow, so badass. And then I killed him in like 14 seconds.
By the end, I was like, maybe you should use some augmentations then.
Well, the very goofy thing about the doesn't use any augmentations thing is that the dude is using funnels. He's using bits, which in like Gundam is basically is how you write the word new type on your forehead in glowing green letters. If you use funnels or bits.
Yeah, to explain, they're basically like autonomous weapons outside of your body that are like the little they're basically like little floating drones. And in Gundam, it's like they're not autonomous. You're basically controlling them with your psychic powers, is how you're controlling them in Gundam. And so like that's basically why I called it the Chapter 4 boss the Cubile, because that's basically what it is. It looks like Metal Gear Ray, and it has all these autonomous funnels. So it's like it's this very famous mech from Double Zeta, where it's just like this weird, very shell-shaped looking thing that is very powerful and has all these like lasers that are firing from all these random angles, and this guy has them too.
Yeah, and so I think it's just very funny that the one not quote unquote non-augmented pilot is the number 1 signifier that you are a new type or cyber new type.
Barrett Boswell says, are you finding the arena combat too easy? I've never once lost. I know it's been since Silent Line on PS2 that I last played an Armored Core game, but I don't remember the arena in previous games being this easy. I don't think this is a spoiler because I haven't played them. I have heard there are more ranks
in New Game Plus. Yeah.
So hopefully it'll be harder. I wrote down, I think the arena is fun for testing viability. I much prefer the arena to try a new build than like going into a mission or something. But yeah, focusing on just AC combat, it does feel like you can just make things that melt them.
Yeah, it's also, as a minigun user that is usually like kind of running deficits, it's like it's nice to have a simulated environment where cost per round doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I think the only arena fight that actually gave me any trouble was that there's like I forget what their name is, but there's a guy who uses a very heavy tank build in the desert, and that guy gave me a lot of trouble because it was just I didn't have like the weapons to actually like fight it because it has very thick armor that you have to basically use explosive weapons on, and that was like he was the only guy who was tankier than I was, and so like me running at it and just like trading damage with it didn't work, so I had to actually play that fight, whereas normally it's just like just run at them with everything I have and just overwhelm them immediately.
Was it my favorite name and insignia, Cannon Head? Because Cannon Head, I saw it and I was like, that logo is going front and center on my mech. just a big old cannon head right there.
Yeah, a lot of the logo design in this game is top notch.
Yes, the last mech was named Freud, which I thought was funny little thing. There are a number of actually, the logos are like, I love all of the split brain or multiple personality kind of implying logos. Like there are ones of like two brains hooked up to the same thing, and there's one of like two people kind of joined, almost symbiotically or whatever. And there's like the snail one, which is like a bunch of different heads with masks.
like a Pastrika doll or whatever it is, but it's just like split open heads.
And so cool. They do so much storytelling of just like, I wonder what this means. And
I've uncovered a new kind of weirdo just by looking at this logo.
Yeah. Okay, after we beat Chapter 4, this game just becomes a Souls game in its dialogue, at least, because Walter tells you to burn it all down, let the last cinders burn, which is just like, damn, you got one natural analogy that you use for everything, but I thought it was sick. I will never get tired of fire as a symbol for what you have to do to things. What's gonna happen in Chapter 5?
I think you're gonna fight Handler Walter. I think that's gonna be a regrettable fact of life.
Oh, I don't think you ever fight that dude. Maybe on New Game Plus, but no, like you are doing your job to him, I think. You definitely fight handlers in previous games, but I do not think Walter would be I cannot imagine an interesting fight against Walter. In a way, I do think we actually already have our fight against Walter, which is the fight against the Q-Play, because of the amount of implications that Walter was the other scientist at the head of original Coral research program.
Mm-hmm.
Is very much like, and the fact that like the Ibis shows up and he's like, oh yeah, these guys, am I right? It suggests to me that, like, I don't know, I almost like looking at that as the like surpassing Walter fight.
That's where that thread climaxes. I could see that.
Yeah, because after that fight, he is like, you are the one who gets to choose this now. And it would be weird if he went back on that.
Yeah, it's interesting to just kind of think of like what in the story still needs to be like wrapped up. You know, it's like, depending on my choices, I killed all the red guns, so the Vespers are still around. Rusty is still around. I guess we didn't talk about the escape mission. Let's talk about that. That's part of this, even though it's technically in Chapter 5. You're dragged away. You get, as soon as you beat the Chapter 4 boss, you get like electrified by Snail with a sniper rifle from a mile away. They drag you off into a cell. You wake up and you've been put in like old AC armor that just has like a basic machine gun and a rocket launcher.
You don't wake up in it. You crawl to it.
Yeah, there's the cutscene where he's explaining with the burn it all down cutscene is you basically crawling to your to that mech. Mm-hmm. And then you basically have to do like a quasi stealth mission where everyone's looking for you and everyone's realizing, oh, he's in this thing. And then you basically get to the rad people who are like who were in the area, and then they pick you up essentially after you defend yourself from a bunch of tinier mechs.
Yeah, but that's a great point, because it is kind of the only part of the game where it implies your body. like outside of a mech.
Yeah, that it exists outside of it. I had a weird thing where like that was after. So this fight or this mission rolls in immediately after you beat the Cubile, and so I had a thing where it's like I had been trying this thing for hours and I had already had it out and came back, and then I died, I think, at the end, basically right before the mission would have ended. I died, and so like when I got to the cutscene the second time, I just skipped it and my game crashed, and I was terrified at some point that I was going to lose all of my progress, including that last mission in Chapter 4. So I had a very brief scare, but I just started to see the escape mission again.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Carla comes in and saves your ass, which is nice. I was wondering if this mech was like from a previous game, you know, because this seemed like the kind of, it seemed like the perfect time to be like, here's an old design, and it's like everyone's favorite from AC1 or something.
Well, it does play like an older AC game insofar as like that is not a thing that is like dashing and boosting and skidding around. You have to play it in like an old AC game, and that like you are really peeking corners and like having to like awkwardly maneuver this thing that you don't trust around people. The other thing being that like the jamming bomb also applies to you, and so will disable your lock on as well. And so, you know, it's I think that the game just, even if it isn't like literally an old AC from one of the previous games, it is at the very least like playing with what it means. Like it understands that there are previous games and that they felt a certain way, and that feeling can be evoked.
Yeah. This was, I didn't really love the other stealth mission. This one, I thought it was like easy enough for one. But I really liked it. And I love the kind of, it kind of felt like Iron Man 1, like the movie Iron Man 1, where he builds the like crappy Iron Man to get out of the desert cave of just like, we just got to get through this thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting how they're like, yeah, you're going to have to sneak around. Like, make sure you like, you're peeking around corners, and like there's this mech at the beginning in a tunnel that like avoided sightline. And I was so much in a hurry to just finish it because I'd just beaten the Chapter 4 boss and wanted to go to sleep. And so like I just boosted past most of the things where they're like, oh, if the spotlights see you, they'll all attack you. And it went perfectly fine right up until the end where I died, but my checkpoint was already there. So I basically just boosted past all of the stealth stuff.
That's funny. Yeah, and so that's where we are for 5. I mean, is one of the options going to be that this planet blows up?
Oh, I mean, that is.
Is that the only option?
I think that the ending of this game. I'm gonna. Here's my guess on the. You activate the fires of Ibis again. World gets burned out. Everyone's mad at you, but you do it. Option 1. Option B. You let it continue, and then you get an epilogue where it blows up and like actually kills everyone. Option 3, a secret third thing that somehow makes you feel worse.
Yeah, and it's like I don't even have a guess of like when we're talking about new game pluses and pluses, like what they're going to introduce to the story. No clue, but I can't wait.
I don't think it'll be like a Nier Automata situation where it's like mandatory that you play the game multiple times to actually understand what's going on. I think it'll be more context stuff, but maybe I'm wrong.
From my understanding, New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus do in fact add like pretty essential information to understanding how the plot and this world work.
And at the end, it is going to ask if you want to erase your save file, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Okay, let's end with this comment from Carter H, which I just think is a cool discussion point. On this week's podcast, Jenna Sieber said that AC6 is so clearly a FromSoft game. I have to respectfully disagree. If you took the FromSoft logo off the box and put this game in front of me, I would have had absolutely no idea it was made by them. Even after rolling credits, I would have guessed maybe Capcom or Konami. Besides just being a third-person action game, there's almost nothing I experienced in it that made it similar to a Souls game. I guess the stagger mechanic did remind me of Sekiro, and the jump pads feel like torrent jump pads, but that's it. And I love it for that. I wanted something totally new to me and fresh, and I definitely feel like I got that. Is this a From game?
This is an insane question. It's called Armored Core 6. They made five fight entries
Well,
for this.
okay. So
I understand what that question means, but like the point of my point of confusion here is that like there is such an obvious design lineage between all of these things. All of these things that is so confusing because like at the end of the day, the Souls games are similar to the Armored Core games in that like your build modifies how it feels to move through the world, and how it feels to move through the world is the thing that defines combat, is the thing that defines difficulty, is what people like come up against it. And so like I just don't think that they're that different. Their mission structure is different, sure, but the underlying ethos and like motivation behind their combat design has remained pretty consistent for decades.
Well, I guess I think that is true. You know, I think when people say FromSoft, or if does it feel like a From game, they are talking about Demon Souls onward.
Yeah, Soulsborne's game, yeah.
You know, I do think that your build affecting the way it feels to play the game and how it feels to move through the world is also true of Monster Hunter. You know, like Monster Hunter is a game that feels radically different depending on what weapon you are using, to the extent that it essentially feels like you were playing like 9 different games depending on what Monster Hunter weapon you're running with. And I do think that there are aspects of Armored Core that remind me more of that almost, especially in kind of the ease of changing between them. Whereas in Souls, I kind of feel like the whole game is a very steady build to where I ultimately want to land. You know, at least when I start a Souls game, I think I'm going to be a guy who uses a big sword. And then the whole game is me gaining enough strength to ultimately use the big sword that I actually want to be able to hold at the end of the game. And this does feel very different than that, in that it is not a game about slowly creating one thing. It is a game about like constant modification to adapt to your environment, which I know that is possible in the Souls games, but that's never really how I've experienced them.
One thing I will note is that like, you know, Elden Ring does have this. Elden Ring gives you respec tokens constantly. Elden Ring is constantly giving you larval tears in the second half of that game. Like, Elden Ring does expect this kind of build variance. Like, think about Millennia Blade. Right, like, there is a reason that boss is weak to blood damage. Is because, like, you are supposed to be able to build into, you know, and pivot your build. That is, to me, like, almost what defines Elden Ring, is that ability to, like, shift and like adapt. That is that game's whole thing, at least in my experience.
Yeah, I think for me, it's like the question is less like, is this a From game, and more like I think there's the Venn diagram of like people who like Soulsborne games. I think it's okay if you like those games a lot to bounce off of this series, to say that like, oh, I really like the Dark Souls, I like Sekiro, I like Bloodborne. But this version of the From formula, or whatever that means, doesn't click with me. And I think that's going to happen to a lot of people because this game is blowing up bigger than any Armored Core game has. And I think there are just going to be a lot of people who will try it and think like, this is not like Soulsborne's game. I don't think this is a game you can easily like, that is not, I don't think these games are included now in the like Soulsborne lineage. But I think that there is a lot of overlap that is going to, like, for people who like doing builds and doing like facing off against really tough opponents, I think those are the things that are going to define what you liked about Soulsborne games, and how that contrasts with this series. I think is going to be like an interesting talking point for a lot of people of like, what did I actually like about Soulsborne games that this game does or does not have?
Yeah, I mean, and personally, I'm finding it's like there are, I love the Souls games. There are so many things in this that are like, this is my type of thing. And, you know, generally I would define myself as like, I am a stylish action guy over a slower Souls-esque combat. You know, like I'll take a Bayonetta before this. But like, I respect a lot in Elden Ring, specifically to fight Millennia. My whole experience that game was finding spells that I thought, well, I'll never use this, and like even when you're respecking, you have to do the thing of like, well, I guess I'll go and buy 40 Titanite shards so I can make my weapon like viable to try with this new build. And just the ease and the kind of like how just like quickly you can change how you play the game is, I think, what, it's not different, but it does feel like I am clicking with this so much more because I just love how the game is not just, like sometimes encouraging flexibility, but it is like built around it. It's like you won't be playing this game unless you are changing how you play constantly.
I guess the thing that I come up against is that like I think a lot of people get very focused on like specific design, like signature pieces of design, like signature design elements as opposed to like a design ethos. I think that Armored Core 6 fits perfectly into FromSoft's design ethos in the same way that Kingsfield and like the Soul series and Armored Core always have. There is an ethos that like resonates throughout this that I think like that is why I think I get so confused when people like this doesn't feel like a From game. It's like, no, it specifically does not feel like a Souls game, but maintains the design ethos that has been present throughout like literal decades of development.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people are using the term From game and Soulsborne interchangeably in that sentence. So like the idea that I think that like I don't think this is like the Souls games, but I think to say that if this game did not have the From Software branding, people wouldn't be able to tell. I think that to me feels like a stretch.
It's lock on versus camera lock. We're talking about very different things, but using similar technology, and it's hard to keep track of what's going on.
I mean, and I think it just depends. Like if you came into From Software from Dark Souls, then you're gonna have like that's gonna shape what you think a From game is. Whereas like my first From Software game was Chromehound, so this is to me definitely a From game in that sense. Here's the thing that I'm going to say at the end of this episode. I am so glad I finally get to just play this game and not worry about when I'm stopping anymore. This is for the next episode, we are going to finish this game, and not only does that mean playing Chapter 5, it means going through New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus if you so wish, although I'm not requiring any of the panel to do that. I'm going to try. This game has just been consuming my thoughts in a way that I think is only like it would have happened to a lesser extent, but the fact that I have been holding myself back just means that I keep like replaying the things because I can't do anything else. And I'm just obsessed with it. And finally, we're going to finish it for next week. Renata, is Dog with Wings just going to, I don't know, eat the rest of this game alive? Do you think you're going to finish it tonight?
Oh, I mean, no. Explicitly not, because I'm going to make different builds for New Game Plus and New Game Plus Plus. Because, like, I have to. I have to. No, I also still haven't named the weird laser knight that I'm doing right now. But they will be my Chapter 5 mech. And then my New Game Plus, I'm going to try and do something weird for. We'll see.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to try, like, I'm going to try to see how far I can get into subsequent playthroughs, but I think since I found Tetrapod stuff, I've basically been using Tetrapod almost exclusively, so I think I'm going to try, like, a reverse jointed and, like, more nimble builds, just to see how those feel compared, and maybe I'll try, like, a more tank-oriented build with, like, drifting and stuff, so I think for like, next time I get to more, like, experiment, because I don't feel, like, pressure to, like, get through a particular section of the game. So I'm going to experiment a lot more, but I'm excited to no longer have to stop at a particular point.
All right. And that's it for this chapter of The Deepest Dive. Next time, we're finishing the game. If you want to contribute, if you want us to read your thoughts live on air, join the MinnMax Patreon at any tier from $2 and up, and you will be able to contribute to these thoughts. Suriel, plug away. What you got?
I got a weekly podcast about The Legend of Zelda called Every Week I'm in Tears, where I play The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and one other Zelda game. And I have a Patreon where you can support me because I also do video essays on the side. So you can find that at patreon.com/SurielVasquez. And I think that's everything I can talk about right now. So,
Renata, your remap streams in which the rest of the crew makes you play with the most awkward pieces available, like, I have had multiple discussions about those with friends while playing Fortnite, so I highly recommend watching those. Yes.
That's very funny to me.
Is there anything else that people should look out for from you?
Ideally, this is a called shot. Ideally, by the next recording session of this, there will be a video somewhere that you can watch. I submitted the script. Now I just have to put the damn thing together. So ideally, there will be a video. Elden Ring and maps at some point.
Keep an eye out for that. We will certainly call it out in the next episode if ideally it does come out. And that's it. Thank you everyone for watching the deepest dive on Armored Core 6 Part 2. Next time, we're letting it all burn. Watch out.
Everybody else. So please help support independent games media. Head over to patreon.com/MinnMax with 2 N's.